morning. I'm Christine Jacobs, and welcome to another breakfast briefing from Represent PA. Represent is the PAC in Pennsylvania dedicated to electing women, progressive Democratic women, to Harrisburg with the idea of flipping the legislature Democrat. And what we're going to talk about today is give you a little more adrenaline, or help your adrenaline rush along in terms of what's going on in Harrisburg and why it's getting worse and worse. We refer to this as red alert, and where the GOP is manipulating the rules for self-gain, all while taking advantage of the fact of being in leadership. And what's going on? You know, we all have the right to a democratic, small d democratic state legislature where all of our voices can be heard, where we've got representation across the Commonwealth. Over the last 7 years, though, Governor Wolf has vetoed or threatened to veto legislation which restricts abortion access, changes to voting laws, and budgets that do not meet the needs of Pennsylvanians. And when I say threatening to veto, there's been a number of things that have not gone through the legislature because the Republican leadership has been told that it would get vetoed. There's little bipartisan effort to pass meaningful legislation. We all say, and the theory is that we should have bipartisan efforts, but in fact, very little of the legislation proposed or heavily supported by the Democratic minority ever makes it to committee, much less to the floor for voting. Republican legislators are circumventing checks and balances which exist in a truly bipartisan legislative process. In other words, they're not allowing the voices to be heard, and they're not allowing and they're looking to control how much access Democrats get, both in the legislature as well as your voting rights. And new legislation is being designed to further restrict the governor from acting. For example, last year, Pennsylvanians passed a constitutional amendment which limits the governor's role in an emergency, such as COVID-19 when the pandemic hit us. So what we decided to do today is talk to three of our endorsed legislators who are currently working on our behalf in Harrisburg. Representative Liz Hanbidge is finishing her second term in the House in a Democratic district. I love thinking about Liz's first race in 2018. She was up against a long-term Republican who people said, oh, she's a good Republican. You know, she's really worries about her constituents. So, you know, she can be bipartisan. But the person she was running against was very pro-guns, very anti any legislation around controlling the access to guns, and was also anti-abortion. So I could question, we should all question what a good Republican was. And in fact, the people of Liz's district had those same questions and elected her. She's running for her third term. Representative Jen O'Mara assumed office also after the 2018 election, and she's also up for re-election this year. She's passionate about union protections, a living wage, access to affordable health care, and she also flipped a Republican district in Delaware County that had been Republican for many years, continuing a trend that we're seeing in the Philadelphia suburbs of more and more Democrats, Democratic registration as well as Democratic representation. And we're going to start today with Senator Maria Collett. Senator Collett assumed office also in 2018. She's running for re-election for the first time this year because, as you know, senators in Pennsylvania have a 4-year term, so she didn't have to go through a re-elect in 2020. She's a Democratic chair, which means she's a minority chair of the Aging and Youth Committees, and she's committed to all kinds of important issues in Pennsylvania. One of the things we're very proud of is we were an early supporter of Senator Collett, enabling her to show leadership in in the Democratic Party that she could win. And she's been a valuable voice. She started with a law degree, and then she decided practicing law was not what she wanted to do. So she went back to school and got a nursing degree and worked her way up. She was an emergency room nurse, and then she ran organizations, healthcare organizations. And she's been a very, very valuable voice of for the medical community during the pandemic in the last 2 years. So Senator Collett will start today. Unfortunately, we had a taping problem with Senator Collett's presentation. So I am not going to do it justice, but I'm going to show you her slides and tell you what she talked about, because some of this is it's frightening. It's frightening what the legislature is working on. You know, we at Represent maintain what we call the big issues list, and it's available on our website, and we're going to send it out as part of the follow-up to this call to let you know that there is a very long list of things in Pennsylvania that we wish that our legislators were working on. We wish that they were dealing with the fact that school funding is the most unequal in the nation. And if you sat in on our last call, we talked about the issues in education in the state and how our legislature is failing us and how a Democratic majority would make a difference. So there are many, many issues we wish the legislature was working on, but instead of that, they're working on changing the rules. And one of the things that they're talking about is calling for a federal constitutional convention. And what is that? What's a constitutional convention or convention of states? Well, a provision of the Constitution allows for, if you could get a majority of the states, which is at least, which they call 2/3 or 34, to meet, and they can propose amendments to the Constitution. And then 38 states must ratify any amendment to those Constitution, to the amendments to the Constitution. This has never occurred in the history of the United States. But the gist of this goes back to the way our country is laid out, where if you count numbers of states, and you see it in the United States Senate, where the majority of people in the country are in Democrat states that vote Democrat, but we've got a 50-50 United States Senate, because states that may be large in size are small in population, and they have as much control as a state like Pennsylvania or California or Florida or Texas. And so states like in a constitutional convention, the rights of a state like South Dakota or Montana count as much as what's going on in Pennsylvania. And so they can change the Constitution that way. Senate Bill 152 was actually passed out of the State Government Committee, of which Senator Collett is a member. The vote was 7-4 with no Democrats voting to approve it. Senator Collett was one of those 4. And it's a tool that the Republicans are talking about on a general basis, on a national basis, that'll impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limiting its power and its jurisdiction, limiting the terms of office for officials and members of Congress. But there's nothing in the bill that says how it would be carried out. So what's the big deal? Well, bills like that, first, are distraction. Second, if you notice, if they talk about fiscal restraints, the government has spent a lot of money to help alleviate the problems from the pandemic, both in direct payments to citizens as well as to companies and organizations to keep our economy going and to keep things moving along, to make sure that we all had testing and care for people who got COVID. But all of that are things that would not be allowed in a bill that said we had to have fiscal restraint. So many other issues are looking at that people would like to get done. For example, Senate Bill 863 looks at making Election Day a holiday, which it is in most countries, and makes it easier to put trust in the elections if you know everybody has access. And there are so many other bills that they would like to do, but they can't get done because they're worrying about what kind of control and what's going on and how the legislature wants to take over what's going on with in government. And that's my very short presentation of a wonderful presentation that Senator Collett did, and we're not able to film. So moving on, please. I think we're moving on to Representative Jen O'Mara. Please take it away, Jen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Jennifer O'Mara. I represent the 165th Legislative District. And with the help of Represent, I flipped my district in 2018 for the first time in 40 years. We're represented by a Democrat. And I was the youngest female Democrat elected. I'm not sure if I'm still the youngest woman in the House, though. We've had a couple of other young ladies get elected, but they were not younger than me when they got elected, so I still hold that title. So today I want to talk about voter restrictions that the Harrisburg Republicans are trying to pass. We know that the 2020 election was fair and free and secure. We also know that the 2021 election was fair and free and secure, and they were both operated under the same rules. However, it is only the 2020 election that we continue to get emails about from voters across the state of Pennsylvania claiming that there was election fraud. And this is because of the former president and all that he has done to undermine trust in the election. Unfortunately, many of our colleagues have joined in on that effort, despite the fact that none of them questioned taking their own oath of office. So I guess they thought only the top of the ballot had fraud, not the rest of the ballot. Many of our colleagues sent letters decrying the election, asking our electors not to certify the results in 2020, but somehow they forgot about all of that in 2021. So what is happening now, and Liz is going to talk a little bit about, or Representative Hanbidge is going to talk about some of the constitutional amendments that they are working on. I want to focus on legislation. There was one voter package, we'll call it, that Representative Seth Grove, the chair of the State Government Committee, put forward, HB 1300, that passed earlier in this session. It has many of the same components I'm about to talk about, but that was vetoed by Governor Wolf. Yet another time that Governor Wolf has come to save the day. So they started over, and now they have HB 1800, which is their new voter restriction act. That's what we're calling it, the Voter Restriction Act. This bill is basically a very, very long list of terrible things that Republicans want to implement to make it harder for people to vote. And we know why they want to do that, because when more people vote, Democrats tend to win. That is because Democrats have a higher majority of voters in Pennsylvania, and because Democrats really like vote by mail. When we passed Act 77 in 2019, the big reason that we were so successful, or the big reason the Republicans wanted to pass it, is because they thought vote by mail would benefit everyone, as it does in states like Florida. And they also thought getting rid of straight party ticket would benefit them by about 4 points. This was the research we heard them talking about on the floor. But what actually ended up happening is vote by mail benefited us. Democrats tend to use vote by mail by about 70%, which is much higher than the Republican percentage. And so all of these things that I'm about to talk about are targeted at limiting voters, changing vote by mail as we know it, which we know the current law is under consideration by the state Supreme Court, and also allowing the legislature to have a really powerful check in elections, which they should not do. If we want to keep our real checks and balances in place, they should not be giving this authority. So first things first, the bill would change the deadline to register to vote from 15 days before an election to 30 days, making it even harder for voters to get registered. 20 states currently allow same-day registration, which is something that our colleagues in the House and Senate on the Democratic side are working on implementing for Pennsylvania. The bill would also only allow one drop box per county, with one additional for every 100,000 residents, but no more than 10. So for example, Delaware County currently has 47 drop boxes. We would have to take that number down to 10. Philadelphia County would be allowed 10 drop boxes for over 1.5 million people. Allegheny County would be allowed 10 for 1.2 million people. Sullivan County would be allowed 10 for 6,500 people. So it is completely unfair and would totally eliminate access to our ballot boxes. In addition to reducing the number of ballot boxes, each box would have to be monitored during all hours of operation by 2 inspectors of election, one from each party. So if the Republicans wanted to simply make it so a drop box couldn't operate, they wouldn't have someone there serving as an inspector. When it comes to pre-canvassing, which is something we all know we do want to see change, the counties have asked for us to allow pre-canvassing. And pre-canvassing does not allow counting of ballots. It simply allows preparing ballots to be counted so that beginning on election day, we could start counting them through our tabulation machines. The counties have asked for 21 days to do this. This bill, the Voter Restriction Act, HB 1800, allows it for up to 5 days before an election, but only for 12 hours at a time. So it would be allowed starting 5 days prior, but only 12 hours a day. It's not enough time. And it's really just paying lip service so they can say when they're touting their bill, we're allowing pre-canvassing and the Democrats are opposing it. That's really not the case. The Voter Restriction Act also eliminates the permanent mail-in voting list. So if anyone here is a mail-in voter, they know that they can opt in to receive the reminder to certify that you want it every year. And it happens automatically if you choose a certain box when you're registering. This would take that away and require that you have to process and or request a new ballot each election. No reminders, no automatically mailed ballot if you requested one. And it totally puts the burden on the voter. When this bill also allows a new office to be created, because the party of small government loves creating new bureaucracy, called the Bureau of Election Audits, with near unlimited power to subpoena ballots and county election officials. It also would require these election audits to be done within weeks of the election. And it removes the ability of the Secretary of State to manage and regulate elections. So this is a really dangerous component of the bill, in my opinion, giving the legislature way too much authority to intervene in our elections. And like the election fraud that we saw in Arizona, this bill would require a computer or allow a party to designate a computer expert to be in the vote counting room. So this could be someone from a private election firm or an out-of-state company that is there to try and cause trouble when ballots are being counted. There are many, many more bad parts of this. These were the most egregious, in my opinion. One of the other things that this bill does is require voter ID and also require you to use the last 4 of your social security number when registering to vote. And if that sounds familiar, it's because that's what the state Senate is currently pushing us to do, give more of our secure information and provide voter ID. And this bill doesn't talk about where we're going to pay for many of these changes. So it's going to come down to taxpayers' wallets. And in a time where we really cannot afford that, it's going to make it even more expensive for counties to conduct elections. Now, there is some good news. The first piece of good news is that we have a phenomenal leader in the Democratic caucus in the House, Representative Joanna McClinton, who has offered her own election reform bill, House Bill 2090, which does many of the things that we want to see, allows pre-canvassing, expands the use of drop boxes, puts drop boxes on college campuses, brings early voting. I mean, it's a wonderful bill. Unfortunately, because she's a Democrat, that also means it won't run. But we have the framework already in place that we want to pass, should we say, take the majority. She also has offered it as a gut and replace amendment to House Bill 1800. So if given the chance, we can vote on it and then actually put Republicans on the record for voting for some of these terrible things, which is one of the nice things we can do with our amendment process. The other piece of good news is that it does not seem like the Republicans actually have the votes to pass HB 1800. It was scheduled to run multiple times, and we were prepared, ready to fight. Everyone had their talking points ready to go, and they pulled it from the schedule. When I checked this week with the executive director of the state government committee, he said the same thing. There is no talk of HB 1800 running anytime soon. I'm not sure if that's because enough Republicans have seen the light. I doubt it. I think it's more likely that because we are so close to an election, they and many of our Republican colleagues are now in districts that are more favorable to Democrats. They don't want to take some of these votes and then be attacked by their very capable Democratic opponents. And so while I say it's not scheduled to run, I do always say, please remain vigilant. I know that Chris will. I know that she will let everyone in Represent know when it's time to call your representative, especially if you live in a Republican district. But the one thing that we are seeing happening right now is the Republicans are really angry and they're really upset about the way that things went with redistricting. They expected to be able to get what they wanted through throwing fits and gerrymanders and all of those things we saw them try to attempt. But instead, thanks to the leadership of Joanna and Senator Costa and Representative Bradford, we actually got fair maps. And in the House, we really do have a chance of getting to 102 votes with those maps. And so I don't know what will be on the table with Republicans as they feel like they are at the risk of losing their power. And so I expect the rest of this year to be a very interesting year, and to see them pull tricks, because they love pulling tricks, like Chris mentioned at the beginning. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for helping to get women elected. Thank you for helping us and focusing on the state legislature. It's so important. And while the federal government is very important, and I appreciate all the work we do there, the state house and the state senate have more of an impact on your direct life, and they have more of an impact on the success or failure of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So thank you for focusing on us. Thank you for helping us. And thank you for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Jen. And I want to make sure you all heard, Jen gave a great call out to Leader Joanna McClinton. And one of the things that Leader McClinton has done is she was really spearheaded a lot of the efforts on the redistricting. She was on the redistricting committee and really did an outstanding job of putting forth maps that people really shouldn't complain about for the House, except for the temper tantrums that Representative O'Mara talked about. So thank you very much. Take it away, Representative Liz Hanbidge.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, I am really hoping that this year or next year we can start calling Leader McClinton Speaker McClinton.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
I can't wait to do that. I'm going to speak a little about the constitutional amendment process in Pennsylvania, and I'm also going to just give a high level as to why that's important. As you heard from Representative O'Mara and Senator Collett, we're seeing persistent attacks on people's rights. And one of the ways that we're seeing that is through the constitutional amendment process. And you would think that that would actually be a clean process. We bring a question to voters for them to answer. But we're seeing the undermining of the foundation of our government by manipulation of that process. And part of that manipulation is that the governor can't veto that. We lose the checks and balances that are inherent in our government as people try to maneuver around this process. And some of these seem so straightforward. I think you'll remember, I think it was in 2017, one of the constitutional questions was, shall the Pennsylvania Constitution be amended to require that justices of the Supreme Court, judges and magisterial district judges be retired on the last day of their calendar year in which they attain 75 years of age? And that just seems, the question seems to be, should judges have a retirement age and should it be 75? And it's pretty kind of foolproof. Yeah, it's true, judges should retire, obviously. And I talk about this mainly to classes when I go into colleges or even high schools. And I say, how would you answer that? And almost every person raises their hand. I would say it to adults too. Raise your hand if you think that judges should have to retire at 75. That was the question posed to you. The question actually posed to you was, should we raise the judicial retirement age from 70 to 75? And nobody going into the ballot boxes that year had a clue that that was the question, nor did they know the motivation behind it. And the motivation behind it was to keep certain justices on the Supreme Court and other appellate level courts for longer, because they wanted to try to retain majorities. So this isn't a new process, but we're seeing the GOP utilize it more and more. And no matter who we have in the gubernatorial mansion, this process still puts us at risk unless we flip one of the houses or one of the chambers of General Assembly. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the pending constitutional amendments we have. The process by which constitutional amendments pass is they have to pass the House and the Senate twice using the same language. And some of these are teed up to be utilized. So Rep. Diamond has a constitutional amendment that would gerrymander the appellate courts. It would create judicial districts in certain areas and people would have to reside in them to be on our appellate courts. If you think about, if you crush your hand, do you want to have to go to the surgeon at whatever county hospital because they're in the county, or do you want to go to the best and the brightest at Penn or whatever hospital is in some city near you that the guy can put hands together and practically put them back on, or the woman can put hands together and practically put them back on? People tend, and I remember this from my law school classmates, the best and the brightest went to some of the biggest firms, and which were typically in the cities, and they were exposed to some of the more intricate cases And that's where they went. They left their hometown. They didn't necessarily leave their values behind, but they went to different places where the best and the brightest congregated. Rep. Diamond's intent is that we create these special judicial districts so that people who live and work in whatever county become superior court justices or other appellate level judges and justices. But it's intended to make the courts more conservative, but at the risk of the courts themselves. And it also allows the legislature to determine what the districts look like, when we should be doing these elections and things like that. So we truly undermine the independence of the judiciary. And this one's being teed up. So I think this is a direct threat to our courts, and it's intended to frighten them. And I think we're going to see it come now that the courts have made determinations that the Republicans don't like with respect to ballots and maps. I think we're going to see more and more of these sorts of little underminings of the court system, because frankly, what happens with these constitutional questions is if people haven't had the opportunity to research them or haven't taken the time to research them, they presume that the General Assembly passes, it must be okay. And since 1990, every constitutional amendment that's been proposed has passed. And they're tricky about when they place them on the ballot too. So after the presidential election last year, when we had a low turnout primary, which is always happens after a presidential, is usually the lowest turnout race of a cycle, we voted to limit the governor's emergency declaration powers. And that passed overwhelmingly because people were frustrated. It passed overwhelmingly because a lot of people who are independents don't think that they can actually vote in those primary elections, even on constitutional questions. And it passed because people thought, the General Assembly wants this to happen, so it must be okay. And I was especially concerned about this one because we were in the very height of the pandemic. We just come out of another surge. And people were frustrated, understandably, but also we didn't know what was coming. We didn't know what the next thing to hit us would be. And we were limiting the possibility that the governor could protect us. It also could have limited our ability to get federal funding. If we needed federal emergency dollars, that would have required an emergency declaration, we might have actually put that at risk. And we saw that with the hurricane. They actually had to call us back to session a week early to extend the declaration related to Hurricane Ida. We have other bills that are intended to gerrymander and pick apart the courts. Some are intended to make it so that the office of lieutenant governor goes away, and automatically whoever is pro temp in the Senate would then become the governor in the event that the governor would become unavailable. I kind of question that one because I think the Senate is the body which would have the ability to impeach a governor. So then you're saying whoever the Senate leader is that could call the impeachment could then become the governor. Very questionable. We see a lot with respect to voting rights and lack of voting rights. Valid identification at every polling location. If you wanted to do an absentee ballot, you've got to photocopy your ID. Enshrining a 30-day deadline to register in our Constitution, and prohibiting where donations can come to organizations that are trying to get out the vote and things like that. These are intended to limit the rights of voters and to silence people's voices. And that's a theme that we continue to see. And some of these things like voter identification, when you have conversations about it to people and you talk about sort of the boots on the ground issues, it's not only, and typically it has been persons of color, poorer people that have a harder time getting voting identification or personal identification or might have less access to it. Now, more and more, I'm seeing seniors that are starting to get concerned about this. And that's as you have conversations about people like, how do seniors get it? How can people get into public places to get these things, and who can afford it? People start to back off on that, but it's something that we see persistently, and it's being determined that it does specifically suppress certain types of voters, and that is its actual intent. Diamond has another one. You got to do ballots in person only. I'm just looking at a list of constitutional amendments I have, because there are so many bad ones that I wanted to pick it apart, and I'm like, which one should I choose? But Diamond has one that says the Constitution of Pennsylvania would make a constitutional right to refuse immunization, medical care, or other prophylactic public health measures, and that businesses who tried to institute them would also be considered to be doing unconstitutional measures. So that would be, I mean, like if your supermarket asked you to mask, that would be determined unconstitutional. A lot of these things have been aimed specifically at what we saw pandemic and post-pandemic.
Excuse me,
yeah.
Rep. Hanbidge, did that say any kind of immunizations, and was that any kind of organization would be prohibited? I think about elementary schools that require
or
measles
hospitals.
for example.
Hospitals. One of the ones that we had was literally it wouldn't allow hospitals to protect people. So yeah, no, that would have been included under this.
But there's a whole list of immunizations that people are required for public schools and for university students having to have certain extra vaccines and all of that. All of that would be prohibited by that law. Oh, you can say
Yeah. It's shocking, right? You're thinking about like, oh, we don't have polio for a reason, but it might come back. Thank you, Rep. Diamond. The intent is so short-sighted. And if you think the Constitution is our foundation, and you're looking at a body that is literally being like, oh, let's take a pickaxe to this thing. We don't know what it does, but it'll be fine just because we didn't like this thing that happened. I mean, it like my mental picture of what's going on is someone in the basement just taking I don't even know what it would how you would cut down a foundation, but whatever they're doing, it's all plugged in and ready to go, because they aren't looking at the long-term picture. Another one, so if you didn't like the maps, let's do a constitutional amendment to make sure we fix the process to ruin it for everybody. Rep. Grove has a constitutional amendment that would basically do away with all of the work on the maps and put in an 11-person partisan commission. And this, I mean, these are going to go to voters. These are going to go to voters, and we're going to have to make sure that we talk to every single one of them about the dangers of these sorts of things, because whomever we get in the gubernatorial mansion can do nothing about constitutional amendments, which is why it is so desperately important that we flip houses, one of the general houses of the General Assembly. I'm going to talk about one last one, and then I'm going to talk about what you can do to help prevent this from happening. So the final one is Rep. Oberlander, and then there's a Senate one that actually passed through committee, and I think it's now on the Senate floor. It would amend the Constitution to provide that there is no right to abortion or public funding for an abortion. This would amend our Constitution to enshrine that. These attacks are on people and their rights and their ability to impact their government. They're persistent, they're deep, they're clever, and we have to fight back. And the thing that you can do to fight back today is go into the chat. If you have not signed a petition and you're a registered Democrat to get your candidate on the ballot, if they're in that list in your new district, look up your new district, go help them get on the ballot. Some of these seats, if we have, this year, because of the redistricting process, we have only 10 days rather than the typical 21 to get our candidates on the ballot. So I need you to reach out to Maria. I need you to reach out to me. I need you to reach out to Melissa Serrato, Alexandra Whistler, Rep. O'Mara. Ask if you can sign our petitions. We'll have somebody drive them out to you. If you have friends and neighbors that you know are Democrats, we'll email you the petition, and then you can sign them. We've got directions about how to do it, and you can bring them back. We've got signing events. I know Nancy Gintner, who was here before, she's walking for me and Maria and Senator Collett, and I really appreciate it. We get on the ballot with your help, and this year that's been a bifurcated process, and it's been harder for our volunteers to step up twice, and it's been harder for us to get people to get us on the ballot. I know Jill Dennon's often in need of signatures. Every one of us needs you. We also need you to talk to your friends and neighbors and get us elected. We have to flip one chamber, or we're going to see these constitutional amendments impact our rights as the Republicans break down the foundation of our government.
Well, thank you very much. And I know, Rep. O'Mara, you have to be leaving. I just wondered, we have a number. The good news is we're going through our endorsement process now. We did 13, we sent checks out to 13 people in December for reelects. We've got 7 more reelects in the process, in this endorsement process, and we have 22 candidates who have applied to us for endorsement. Some of those we won't be able to do because it's women running against women, and we don't pick a horse in those kind of races. But it's so fascinating. But Rep. O'Mara and Rep. Hanbidge and Senator Collett, is this possible? Is it possible to flip one of the chambers this time? With the new maps, with everything going on, I keep hearing, well, probably not this time. And I come back and say, if not this time, we're in trouble. What do you think?
I think we can.
Yeah, I think we can in the House. I don't know about the Senate, but I do definitely think we have a chance in the House.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Senate is going to be 2 cycles to get us to a majority, but we have incredibly, we have some districts that have changed significantly. So I think we're going to see some good additions to our caucus. But I do think it's going to be a 2-cycle process for us to get to majority in the Senate. And so I will tell you that, supporting my House colleagues is paramount. We have to flip those Senate seats that we have a chance at, the 24th, the 10th, the 6th. No, the 10th is already a Democrat. The 6th is a good one. We have a new Senate seat up in the Lehigh Valley, Senate seat 14. If we can add those to our caucus, we'll be stronger. And then, we really do have to do the work to make sure that the House flips, because they have a great opportunity to do it this cycle. And as Liz and as Representative Hanbidge and Representative O'Mara have said, it's really critical that we have control in one chamber of the legislature at least, so that we can assist our governor. And our governor has no power when it comes to a constitutional amendment, but the people in our legislature do. They can block those constitutional amendments from getting on the ballot. And I put a little factoid in there that in the 235 years, the United States Constitution has been amended 27 times. And over the course of one session year, the Republicans have moved 27 amendments to our PA Constitution. So they are just, they're on fire. They are just trying to amend the Constitution because they see it as their way around the veto pen. And again, that undermines the power of the voters.
So I want to comment. There's been a number of questions about, people aren't sure who's running in their district. They're represented currently by a Republican, for example, and don't know who the Democrat might be. If you put your question in the chat, we'll make sure that we go back through the chat after the call, and we'll send you direct messages and let you know what we found out about your district. There's also been some questions about districts where the Republicans are running unopposed. It's going to happen. And that's because in a number of the districts we have, they're 70% Republican. And it's a question of whether the resources need, and again, this is a difficult process, but it's a question of whether the resources need to be spent in those particular red districts, or whether you would be better served if the district near you that has a Democrat, the Democrat is reelected, or we can elect somebody there. And that's the purpose, one of the purposes of Represent. I always call this the mutual fund. We don't invest everybody's money in every race. We can't. We don't have enough money. But what we do is we pick the races that we think are winnable. The caucuses are doing the same thing. They know that every district is not winnable, but they figured out which ones are winnable, and that's where we're concentrating our effort. And if you just think about your district, I always tell people I live in Philadelphia. I'm always going to be represented by a Democrat, but I want to make sure that the legislature represents me in whole. And that's why I support candidates all over the state. And that's what you can do by supporting Represent. Senator Collett or Senator Hanbidge, any final words you want to give us?
I just want to say, I've seen a lot of people saying in the chat, is there an easy way to see who is running for House or Senate in every district? There isn't, but the best way to do it is to look up your local Democratic committee and see who they are, listing as the Democratic candidates for the area where you live. That's the best way to sort of go about doing it. I can tell you that in the Senate, we have a Democratic candidate running against every Republican that is running. And just as Chris said, we can't put resources behind every single one of those people. We really have to make determinations about who has the best shot at getting across the finish line and flipping a district. But we do have candidates running. We have actively recruited and found someone to run in every one of those seats. Again, with the Senate, as you know, it's 25 running every 2 years. So
Right.
we do not run all 50 every 4 years. It's split. So we have 25 Democrats running this cycle.
And as I said, we'll be happy to get back to anybody who asks us. If we always know who the women are who are running because they've applied to us. Somebody asked about Lancaster County. I don't know where in Lancaster you are, but I know Janet Diaz, who we supported last time for a Senate seat, is running for one of the new House seats there. So, but if you tell us where in Lancaster you are, we'll let you know. Liz, any final words?
No, just thank you to everything that Represent does and that all of you are doing. So coming to things like this is part of the way we spread the word. It is vitally important that we spread the word on things like flipping the chamber, getting people on the ballot, walking, knocking doors, postcarding. The footwork has to happen here. Especially this year, we're going to see Roe v. Wade get overturned. And I've been surprised about the number of people that I've talked to who are surprised by that at the door. So the expectation of voters aren't matching necessarily my expectations of what's going to happen in this country and what's happening in this state, and having these conversations are part of getting inroads into that. So thank you.
And as Representative Hanbidge said, it's the Supreme Court may decide this time, and it's entirely likely that they will overturn Roe. And what that does is it returns it to the states. And what it does is it returns it to state laws. So if we have a state law that bans abortions, but the Roe v. Wade is still in effect, our law doesn't count. But the minute Roe v. Wade is overturned, whatever laws exist in Pennsylvania are what counts. And that's why this is so important. Tell your friends, and let's go on to our final slides. Thank you very much to our elected officials. We love you, we support you, and we'll try and get as many people talking about you. The other thing besides, we need money. Back to my slides, please. These are the numbers that exist. 90 Dems, 113 Republicans. We keep flipping back and forth. Sarah's iPhone has a question, by the way. I don't know. Okay, you want to speak? You want to unmute yourself?
Hi, sorry, not a big IT person. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, as a Delaware County voter, Mike Zabel's my rep, can I go to Montgomery County and sign someone onto a ballot there? No. Okay.
You have to be a resident of the district. So
okay,
the best,
that's helpful.
So the best thing you'll be able to do, though, is go to another district. Rep. O'Mara would love to have you knock doors for her when she's running for office. So go volunteer in her office, because she also represents Delaware County. And I'm not sure who's running against Mike Zabel.
Well, Mike Zabel also needs signatures. He put out an email yesterday asking for signatures. So the best thing you can do is reach out to his campaign and sign his petition if you haven't yet. You have to be a registered Democrat in the district in which you sign. So if you're an independent and you're thinking about this, you can change your registration today and still sign.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful.
We're a full service supplier of voting information for you all. And if you're ever in doubt, send us an email and we'll get you an answer. As we said, 28 of the current Dems have been supported and endorsed by Represent in the past, but we have many more running this time. In the Senate, 8 of the 22 are women that we've endorsed in the past. Pennsylvania continues to rank 34th out of the 50 states in percentage of women in the state legislature. We've made a lot of progress to represent, but got so far to go. This is our investment strategy. We talked about the fact that we can't give to everybody. We don't have the money to give to everybody. But so we're looking for money, and we'll invest in the best races we can. And in December, we invested $64,000 in 13 incumbent legislators. We've already done 6,000 this year, about 6,000 this cycle in special elections. Last cycle, we were 500,000 altogether. We hope to do a significant amount shortly. If you're curious how we go about endorsing, here's your answers. Anybody who's at the endorsement level, which is $1,200 a year or $100 a month, is invited to join our endorsement committee. It's not too late to donate, and let us know you're interested. If you think you qualified and you haven't heard from us yet, send us an email. The perks, and we think these are perks, that you get to read and score candidate applications. You learn more about how candidates view key issues. And then we've got endorsement committee meetings coming up. Saturday, April 9th from 1 to 4 on Zoom. We're going to be going through, so first, if you want to be part of the early process, we'll send you applications and you get to score them and learn about the candidates. Then on Saturday, April 9th, you can be part of our Zoom call. We'll be talking about the candidates. We'll be talking about how much money we have to spend, and you will help us to do this process. I know Bill Ewing is on the call. He's always a big participant in these. I know Joanne Heil is on the call. She's looking forward to her first endorsement process, and many of our other endorsers are on this call. It's a fun thing to do. It's an interesting thing to do, and you really understand Pennsylvania better after these. Check out our website, invite friends to join us by donating. We've got another breakfast briefing coming up on April 6th. It'll be really interesting. It's a woman from the Water Center at the University of Pennsylvania is going to discuss water as an equity issue in Pennsylvania. We think of water as being an environmental issue. We think of it as, well, we've got the third worst drinking water in the country, but it's also an equity issue because the water is so different in different parts of the state. And just like air pollution and where power plants have been situated is an equity issue, so is water. We've only got a few days left to double your impact. If you're a new donor to us, we've got a generous sponsor who's willing to do a one-for-one match on new donations. Please send to us. Go to the Represent PA website. The other things you should know are that one of the things you'll get as a thank you for attending this email is you're going to get a list of all the things that are wrong with Pennsylvania. We maintain a list that we call the big issues in ways that our legislature is failing us. Clearly not the Representative O'Mara or Representative Hanbidge or Representative or Senator Collett, but all of overall, the legislature is failing us in terms of having poor water, poor education. If you were on the last call, you understand how poorly education is funded in Pennsylvania. You name a subject, we're bad at it in Pennsylvania, worse than most other states. And so we're going to send out the list just so that when you talk to people and you encourage people to donate to us, hand them the list and say, did you know this? And it always surprises people. So we're just about 9:30. A number of the people who are currently running for office have been on the call. They've sent you their emails. They've told you who they are. Again, if you need to us, if you want us to help you figure out if there's candidates in your district that you can support or whose petitions you can sign, let us know. And I mentioned the April 6th event is out there if you want to RSVP to that. But one other thing I wanted to mention is we do pay attention to the national elections. On April 11th, from 5 to 7 in Philadelphia near the Art Museum, one of our donors, one of our executives is hosting an event for Congresswoman Val Demings from Florida, former head of the police in Orlando, an enthusiastic member and a strong member of one of the impeachment committees and the Judiciary Committee. She's running for Senate against Marco Rubio. She needs to win. Because if we're going to get to the point where we have a clear majority and can overrule the filibusters in the United States Senate. We need a stronger Democratic majority in the Senate, and Val Demings has a great opportunity. Will be later today. The link is on our website. We're looking for donations of $500 to attend the event, but it's an important election, and you can come meet a very strong, wonderful congresswoman who's a future senator, and please help us get her elected. Just heard yesterday that a fellow Judiciary Committee member, Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon, is going to join us at that event because she believes in Val Demings' campaign. So watch for that too. And again, everybody, thank you very much for attending, and go sign petitions.